So if you asked an 8th century scholar how the world ends, they wouldn't uh, point to the stars falling from the sky or some vague, abstract cosmic void.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right, like they would point to a very specific bridge in Damascus. They would warn you about a warlord with like a specific facial scar who rides a red camel.
Yeah, and they tell you exactly which village in Syria is going to literally sink into the earth.
Exactly. And so today we are opening up an ancient manuscript that treats the apocalypse not as this mystical mystery, but as a hyper-specific, terrifyingly detailed military map.
It really is. It's an incredibly granular roadmap of the end of days.
And we are looking at a stack of sources today derived from classical Islamic eschatological texts.
Right, and just to clarify, eschatology is basically just the theology of the end times, the final events of history.
Yeah, and specifically, we are diving into excerpts from a monumental work compiled by an early Islamic scholar named Nuaym bin Hamid.
Which is an amazing text. The book is called Kitab al-Fitan, which translates roughly to the Book of Tribulations.
And the mission for this deep dive is to really unpack this text. We're going to map out the Malahim, which means the great epics, right? Like these massive apocalyptic battles.
That's the Great War.
We're going to decode the geography, the key characters, and the timeline of the end of days according to these manuscripts.
Because we're talking about shifting alliances, million-man armies, angelic interventions, and divine figures.
And all of it centered around a very specific geographical theater in the Middle East and the Mediterranean.
But before we really get into the weeds here, I do think it's crucial to set some ground rules for our discussion today.
Oh, totally. We have to do that.
Because we are examining these texts purely as historical and theological documents.
Right.
I mean, these are manuscripts primarily from the 8th to 9th centuries.
Right.
So they reflect the anxieties, the geography, and, the worldview of that specific era.
Exactly. And we are taking an impartial look at what the texts actually say. We are not here to endorse them.
Definitely not.
And we are absolutely not taking sides on any modern political implications that, people might try to draw from them today.
Right. Our goal is simply to convey the ideas contained in the original source material.
Yeah, we're reading an ancient map, not plotting modern policy.
Well put. And if we look at the general overview of this source material, the structure is just striking.
It really is.
It's not a collection of random disconnected visions. It is highly, highly chronological.
Like a timeline.
Exactly. It moves systematically from internal civil strife to massive global wars and then to supernatural interventions.
All building toward this final, ultimate climax.
Right. It treats the end of the world almost like a sprawling historical chronicle of an era that just, hasn't happened yet.
And I was just blown away by how rooted in the dirt this all is. Like, the geography is so central.
Geography is everything in these texts.
There is this metaphor used right at the beginning of these sources that I literally cannot stop thinking about. The text compares the entire geopolitical world to the anatomy of a bird.
Yes, the apocalyptic bird. It's such a striking image.
It's wild.
And it fundamentally centers the geopolitical universe of the people writing and reading this text. According to the manuscript, God created the world like a bird.
Okay.
So the east and the west are the wings. Asham, which historically refers to Greater Syria, encompassing modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. That is the head of the bird.
And it gets even more specific than that, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Homs, the city in western Syria, is the beak of the bird. And Damascus is the chest. And within it is the heart.
This isn't just a poetic way to describe a map, though, right?
It's a statement about causality and geopolitical vulnerability.
Right.
The text says that if the beacons diminishes or is damaged, the people will sort of peck at each other. They'll fight.
That makes sense with the bird imagery.
Exactly. And if the heart of Damascus moves or is agitated, the entire body of the world moves with it. And most terrifyingly, the head is subject to 2 great strikes. One from the eastern wing, hitting Damascus, and a heavier one from the western wing, hitting Homs.
And what happens when the head is struck?
The text warns that when the head is struck, the bird plucks its own wings, feather by feather. Humanity basically tears itself apart.
I kept thinking of it like a game of Risk, but the board is alive, it bleeds.
That's a really good analogy.
But here's where I want to push back a little, or at least ask for your insight. Why is the geography of the apocalypse so hyper-specific?
What do you mean?
Well, usually when you think of the end of the world, you think of universal destruction, right?
Yeah.
The sun blacking out, the oceans boiling.
Right, cosmic level stuff.
Yeah. Why is this text saying, watch out for the beak of the bird in this exact Syrian city?
That is a vital question about the psychology of the people who compiled these traditions.
Yeah.
You really have to immerse yourself in the historical context of the 8th and 9th century Islamic Empire.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So for almost a century, the absolute center of their political, military, and cultural world was Damascus under the Umayyad dynasty.
Right.
Even after the Abbasids overthrew them and moved the capital east to Baghdad, the region of Asham remained incredibly vital. To them, Greater Syria wasn't just a province.
It was the center of the world.
It was the sacred theater of history. It's where the Romans, the Persians, and the Arabs had clashed for centuries.
So their entire lived experience of war and survival literally revolves around the roads between Damascus, Homs, and Jerusalem.
Precisely. If you are a scholar living through the geopolitical trauma of empire shifts, civil wars, and Byzantine raids, it makes total sense that your vision of the end of the world is going to take place on those exact same roads.
Because that's the only world they know.
Right. They couldn't conceptualize an apocalypse that didn't involve the physical cities they lived and died in.
It would be like a New Yorker writing an apocalyptic novel. Of course, the final showdown is going to happen in Manhattan, not on a random asteroid.
Exactly. It's a localized apocalypse that has global consequences.
Which explains one of the most fascinating details in this early part of the text. Because the world outside is turning into this chaotic, wing-plucking nightmare, the text explicitly names an ultimate safe haven.
Yes, the Fustat.
Right, a panic room.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a cloud in the sky or a spiritual state of mind. It's a very specific physical place called Al-Ghouta.
Al-Ghouta. Historically, this is the lush, incredibly fertile oasis region that immediately surrounds Damascus.
Okay.
It is described in the texts as the ultimate Fustat, which translates to a stronghold, an encampment, or a command center for the believers during the Malahim, the great epics.
And the sources are really definitive on this, aren't they?
Very. When the great battles break out, the texts say the stronghold of the Muslims on the day of the great epic is in Al-Ghouta, next to a city called Damascus.
The text actually says it's a place where no enemy can reach them except from within. It's like the ultimate natural fortress. Even when there are these massive naval invasions coming from the Romans, which in these texts generally means the Byzantines or the broader European powers, and they land on the coast of the Mediterranean, the instruction is incredibly clear.
Fall back to Damascus.
Yeah, don't try to hold the beaches, go to the panic room.
And what this tells us about their mindset is that the apocalypse isn't just about passive submission to the end of the world.
It's not just sitting around waiting to die.
Exactly. It's about strategic retreat. It's about holding the line. The sources mentioned that a man asked the Prophet Muhammad how the enemies would drive his community from town to town, and the reassurance given was that Al-Ghouta is their impenetrable fortress against the Malahim.
It's the anchor in the storm.
It really is.
But the safety of Damascus is only crucial because the world outside its walls is about to be absolutely torn apart. The bird is about to lose its wings.
Yes, things are going to get very bad.
So how does this actually start? Because the end doesn't just happen out of nowhere, right? There is a trigger.
There is a very specific trigger. And according to these sources, the dominoes start falling with the collapse of the Abbasid dynasty.
And just to ground us, the Abbasids were the ruling family that took power in the mid-8th century, right?
Correct. They overthrew the Umayyads, moved the center of power to Iraq, and built Baghdad. They were the absolute superpower of the era.
But these eschatological texts predict their ultimate downfall.
Yes, and the countdown begins with an internal dispute. The text says 2 young boys of the ruling family will start fighting, and this leads to a prolonged, agonizing civil war.
And the text describes this internal weakness as the thing that invites outside forces in.
Exactly.
You use as a really potent phrase here, a blind fitna coming from the West.
Now, I know fitna is a loaded word in Islamic history. Yeah. Can you unpack what a blind fitna actually means to a reader back then?
Oh, fitna is one of the most complex and terrifying words in the classical Arabic vocabulary.
How so?
Well, it generally means trial, tribulation, temptation, or civil strife. But it specifically implies a state of chaos where the social fabric completely unravels. So not just a war, but a breakdown of society.
Exactly. And a blind fitna takes that terror a step further. It implies a conflict so chaotic, so morally ambiguous that you literally cannot see who is right and who is wrong.
You can't just pick a side based on righteous principles.
Right, because everyone is compromised. People are just lashing out in the dark, killing their neighbors out of fear and confusion.
That is terrifying. And while this blind civil war is raging, the earth itself starts reacting. The texts describe massive earthquakes in Syria.
Yes, the natural world mirroring the political chaos.
And again, we get that incredible specificity. It doesn't just say there will be an earthquake in the Middle East. It says a specific village in the Ghouta region, a place called Harasta, will literally sink into the earth.
The sinking of Harasta is the definitive signal that the internal decay has reached its breaking point.
Once Harasta sinks, the real geopolitical nightmare begins.
That's right. This is where we see the massive armies mobilize. The text choreographs this immense conflict using flag colors.
Which is pretty common in historical military accounts, right?
Sure, armies obviously use banners to identify themselves. But here it takes on an almost mythical, elemental resonance. First, you have the black banners.
The black banners, coming from the east, specifically from the region of Khorasan, which today would be parts of Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia.
Yes.
The description of these guys in the sources is intense. It says they are fierce men, their hearts are like blocks of iron, they have hair down to their shoulders.
They are a highly stylized military force.
And I love this detail. It says they don't even have normal names. Their names are titles or kunyas, like Abu someone, meaning father of someone. And their last names are simply the hometowns they come from.
Right, it strips them of their individuality. They aren't just farmers or merchants who took up swords.
They're a machine.
Exactly. They are an unstoppable, unified military machine. They're essentially a relentless force of nature. And these black banners from the east are destined to clash with the yellow banners.
Who are arriving from the west.
Yes, specifically originating from Egypt and Alexandria.
So you literally have the two wings of the bird, the east and the west, converging on the center.
Exactly. And the collision happens right at the navel of Sham, essentially the area around Damascus.
They just meet in the middle and clash.
The text says they meet at a bridge, and they fight for 7 days. And the slaughter is immense.
Who wins?
The east eventually defeats the west, but the victory is entirely hollow.
Why?
Because while they are exhausted from tearing each other to pieces, the true human villain of the story steps onto the stage.
Enter the Sufyani.
Yes, the Sufyani.
Reading about this guy, it is just so cinematic. Out of the chaos of the black and yellow banners fighting, this tyrant emerges from a place called the Dry Valley.
Right.
But it's his physical profile that really stuck with me. The text doesn't just say an evil king arose. It gives us an eerie, specific, wanted poster.
It really does.
He has a large head. His face is heavily pockmarked with scars from smallpox, and he has a very distinct white speck in his eye.
He is the embodiment of brutal terrestrial power. The texts are completely unsparing in describing his cruelty.
He's not just a conqueror.
No, he doesn't just defeat his enemies. He slaughters them with a sociopathic efficiency. He accepts ransoms to enrich himself, and there are horrifying details in the traditions about him ripping open the bellies of pregnant women.
Oh, wow, that's dark.
It's meant to be. He sweeps across the region like a plague. And because the forces of the black banners and the yellow banners have decimated each other, he manages to defeat whatever is left of them.
He's just so individualized. He rides a red camel. He wears a crown.
He's very distinct.
Yeah, he's not a faceless, abstract evil. He's a guy with a specific facial scar leading an army from a specific valley. And I have to ask you, as someone who studies these texts, why do apocalyptic narratives always seem to feature a highly individualized human antagonist like the Sufyani before the ultimate supernatural evil arrives?
That's a great question.
Because we know the actual Antichrist figure is coming later. Why do we need this pockmarked warlord first?
There's a profound psychological point. I think it basically comes down to scale and human relatability. The ultimate evil, the Antichrist, which we'll obviously discuss later, is cosmic, supernatural, and almost incomprehensible to normal people.
Right, it's too big to grasp.
Exactly. But a warlord with a smallpox scar who executes people for money and burns villages, that is a terror that people in the 8th and 9th centuries understood all too well.
Because they lived through it.
They lived through warlords. The Sufyani represents the absolute pinnacle of human corruption. He is the worst of what humanity can do to itself.
So he's like the final boss of normal human history.
That is a fantastic way to put it.
Yeah.
Before the world can face a supernatural test, it must first be brought to the brink by a purely human monster.
So the Sufyani is the culmination of that blind fitna we talked about.
Yes, he thrives on the chaos.
So the Islamic world is effectively bleeding out from this civil war with the Sufyani. The black banners are dead, the yellow banners are dead, the Sufyani is terrorizing Syria.
The bird has plucked its own wings.
Exactly. But that internal weakness is basically blood in the water for the empires across the Mediterranean. The rest of the world hasn't been sitting still.
Not at all.
While the Muslims are destroying themselves, the Romans are watching.
The geopolitical landscape shifts dramatically here. Up until now, the conflict has been largely internal to the Islamic Empire. But the text describes a massive turning point.
Oh, truce.
Yes, a temporary truce between the Muslim forces and the Romans. And again, in the parlance of the time, Romans refers to the Byzantine Empire, the Christian superpower headquartered in Constantinople.
This part just reads like a historical thriller to me. The Muslims and the Romans actually team up.
They do.
They form a joint military task force to fight a common enemy somewhere beyond their borders, and they win. They are victorious.
They are.
But then, as always happens with shaky alliances, human nature reasserts itself and it breaks down over the division of the spoils.
They argue over the money, the treasure, and the captives, and then a single spark ignites the powder keg.
What happened?
According to the tradition, a Roman soldier raises a cross and shouts, "The cross has won."
Wow. So he claims the victory for his religion, not for the political alliance.
Right, and a Muslim soldier reacts, probably violently, saying, "No, God's supporters have won."
This triggers a deadly skirmish right there in the camp. The alliance is completely dead.
It's over.
The Romans pack up, they sail back to Constantinople, and they go to their ruler. They tell him, "The Arabs betrayed us, we are more numerous, we are better equipped, give us the order to annihilate them once and for all."
And the Roman ruler hesitates at first, but eventually he agrees. And this sets the stage for the Malahim the Great epic.
The big one.
The Romans assemble a staggering naval fleet. The numbers in the text are really meant to convey an overwhelming, almost unimaginable force.
Tell me the numbers.
They arrive under 80 banners or flags, and under every single flag, there are 12,000 men.
Wait, let's just do the math on that really quick. 80 flags, 12,000 men each. That's 960,000 men.
Almost a million.
Basically, a million-man army landing on the shores of the Middle East in the 8th or 9th century.
Yeah.
That is logistically impossible. No empire could field, transport, or feed a million men on a beach in the Levant. Are these texts meant to be taken literally, or is this mythological hyperbole?
It's a fantastic question. You're absolutely right. The logistics of an ancient or medieval seaborne invasion of a million men are completely impossible.
Right, they just didn't have the ships.
The Byzantine army, at its absolute peak, barely scratched a fraction of that. But in apocalyptic literature, numbers are often theological rather than statistical.
Okay, so what does a million men represent?
It represents an existential threat. It's the author's way of saying, this isn't a border skirmish. This is a tidal wave meant to wipe us off the face of the earth.
Got it.
It is meant to evoke absolute paralyzing terror in the reader.
It gets even more terrifying, because when this massive armada lands on the coast of the Levant near a place called Amuk or Dabik, the Roman commander orders them to do something insane.
He orders them to burn their own ships.
Burn their own ships.
It's the ultimate commitment. Burning the ships sends a clear psychological message to his troops and to the enemy watching from the hills.
There is no retreat.
Exactly. We fight to the death, and we conquer or we die on this sand.
So you have a mythical million-man army that literally cannot go home, facing off against a Muslim army that is already exhausted, fractured, and bleeding from the civil wars with Sufyani.
The odds are non-existent.
The text describes the psychological toll this takes on the Muslim forces, and it's devastating. The army actually fractures into 3 distinct parts.
Yes, and this division into thirds is a recurring motif in Islamic eschatology. It represents the different spiritual and moral responses to overwhelming, impossible odds.
Let's break down the 3 parts.
Sure. The first third of the army looks at this million-man horde, they look at the burning ships, and they break. They just flee.
And the text is incredibly harsh on them.
Very harsh. It says God will never forgive them. They are the ultimate cowards who abandon the faith in its darkest hour.
The traditions mention that some of them flee deep into the desert, but others actually try to join the Romans.
Right.
They say, if God cared about this religion, he would have helped us. It's total spiritual despair.
It is.
Then you have the second third.
Right. These men hold the line, but they are overwhelmed and slaughtered. They fight to the death. The text describes them as the greatest martyrs in the eyes of God.
There's a really specific reward mentioned for them, right?
Yes. It says, a normal martyr from earlier battles might be able to intercede in heaven for 70 people, but these martyrs of the great epic can intercede for 700.
We should probably explain that concept of intercession, or shafa.
Absolutely. In classical Islamic theology, a martyr is granted the privilege of pleading with God on the Day of Judgment to save their family members or loved ones from hellfire.
Oh, wow.
So by saying these men can intercede for 700 people instead of 70, the text is exponentially multiplying their spiritual rank.
It's a huge deal.
Their sacrifice against the Romans is considered the ultimate act of devotion.
Which leaves the final third. The remnants.
The survivors.
The ones who survive the initial onslaught and decide to fight on, binding themselves together with the pledge to death, but they are pushed to the absolute brink.
Yes. The slaughter is so horrific that the text says the blood reaches the fetlocks of the horses.
That is so gruesome, and a Roman soldier steps out between the lines parading a cross, shouting that the cross is conquered.
And just when it seems like the light is going out completely, we get the angelic backup.
Yes. This is where the historical, gritty, military reality of the text suddenly shatters, and the supernatural just pours in.
It's the total paradigm shift.
The text says that God becomes angry at the boast of the Roman soldier, and he commands the heavens to intervene.
Right.
I read this, and my mind immediately went to the ultimate cavalry charge in a fantasy epic, like the Rohirrim charging at dawn in Lord of the Rings, but on a cosmic scale.
That's a great visual.
Because it's not just fresh human troops. God sends the Archangel Gabriel. And Gabriel doesn't come alone. He brings 100,000 angels.
And then God sends Michael.
With 200,000 angels.
And then Raphael with 300,000 angels.
It is a stunning image. The scales of the battle are tipped by literal winged armies descending into the blood and the mud of the battlefield.
And the presence of the angels turns the tide definitively.
Of course it does.
The Romans are routed, despite their overwhelming numbers and their burned ships. The surviving third of the Muslim army, aided by this divine intervention, doesn't just hold the line. They completely shatter the Roman invasion.
It's a massive, miraculous victory. But this victory doesn't just mean they get to go back to their homes in Damascus and rest, right?
Not at all.
The destruction of the Roman army sparks a massive counteroffensive. The surviving believers push outward, and they are going to literally change the map of the ancient world.
They're taking the fight to the enemy's heartland.
Exactly. The defensive war becomes an offensive one of unprecedented scale.
The text details a specific campaign directed at the absolute heart of the Roman Catholic world, the city of Rome itself.
And again, the logistics are provided.
Always with the logistics.
They don't just magically teleport to Italy. The text says a Muslim army will sail to Rome using ships built in Egypt. The wood for the ships comes from Lebanon. The ropes are woven in Egypt.
It's this pan-regional industrial effort to build a fleet.
They cross the Mediterranean, and they conquer the city of Rome.
But the focus of the text isn't on the military tactics of taking the city, breaching the walls, or fighting in the streets.
No, the focus is entirely on what they do once they get inside.
Yes. They are given highly specific, almost Indiana Jones-style instructions by their leaders.
I love this part. The text says, enter the Great Eastern Church in Rome, go through the eastern door, count 7 tiles or paving stones on the floor, and when you get to the 8th tile, pry it up.
Because underneath that specific 8th tile, they will find 3 things.
The staff of Moses, a pristine original copy of the Gospel, and the Ark of the Covenant.
It's an incredibly potent theological image.
I have to ask, why the 8th tile? And, more importantly, why is an Islamic apocalyptic army obsessing over finding the Ark of the Covenant and the Gospel hidden under a church in Rome?
Why do these specific relics matter to them?
Yeah, why do they care?
It is the ultimate expression of supersessionism.
Supersessionism, okay, define that for us.
Supersessionism is the theological concept where one religion claims to fulfill, succeed, or replace the ones that came before it.
Okay.
In the worldview of these 8th century Muslim scholars, Islam is the final, corrected version of the Abrahamic faith. But to prove that definitively, they need the original artifacts.
Because the artifacts legitimize the claim.
Exactly. The staff of Moses represents divine authority and the liberation of the oppressed. The original gospel represents the true message of Jesus, which they believed had been corrupted by later Christian theological alterations.
And the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant is the ultimate symbol of God's presence and covenant with the children of Abraham.
So by finding them,
By uncovering these relics in Rome, the text is framing this apocalyptic army as the true, indisputable inheritors of the entire Abrahamic legacy.
it's a theological checkmate.
Yes, they aren't just conquering a city, They are rescuing the sacred history of Judaism and Christianity from the Romans and bringing it all under the umbrella of their final victory.
That is so fascinating. So they take these relics, they put a young man in charge of them, and they send them back to Jerusalem.
But Rome is only one target.
Right. The true prize, the ultimate symbol of the enemy empire in the minds of the 8th and 9th century authors, is Constantinople,
The capital of the Byzantine Empire.
the city that had repelled multiple massive Arab sieges in real history.
It was the great white whale for them.
And the fall of Constantinople in this eschatological text is surreal. It's not a military siege, it's a sonic weapon.
It is entirely spiritualized. Anyone reading this in the 8th century would know about the Theodosian walls of Constantinople.
They were legendary, right?
They were the most formidable, impregnable defensive structures in the ancient world. Armies had bled themselves dry against those walls for centuries.
So the text doesn't even try to describe a conventional siege. They don't use catapults or Greek fire or battering rams.
No, the text says that an army of men who fast during the day and pray during the night will simply surround the city.
They just camp outside and they fast for 3 days. And then at dawn, under the command of their leader, the entire army lets out a single unified takbir, the proclamation that Allahu Akbar, God is great.
And the sheer spiritual physical force of this combined shout causes the massive walls between two of the towers to simply collapse into dust.
It's exactly like the biblical story of Jericho, but amplified for the end of the world.
The impact is instantaneous. The text notes that the Romans inside the city throw down their weapons and surrender immediately.
Because they realize they aren't fighting a normal army.
Right. They realize they are no longer fighting men, they are fighting the overwhelming power of God himself. The impregnable city falls without a single sword being swung in the final breach.
So the Muslim army enters the city, and the wealth is unimaginable.
Oh, yeah.
The text says they are literally measuring out gold dust using their shields as scoops.
Just massive amounts of plunder.
They are dividing the spoils, allocating captives, celebrating the greatest victory in the history of their civilization. But mid-celebration, while the gold is literally still in the shields, a scream echoes through the camp.
Someone shouts, "The Dajjal has taken your place among your families."
The Dajjal. For listeners who might not know, the Dajjal is the Islamic equivalent of the Antichrist.
Yes, the word literally means the deceiver. He is the ultimate supernatural test of faith, a figure who will roam the earth performing false miracles and demanding to be worshipped as a god.
So the army hears that this ultimate evil is loose in Syria, threatening their wives and children.
And their reaction is immediate.
The army drops the treasure, they abandon the gold, they leave the city, they just miraculously conquered, and they rush back toward the Levant to protect their families.
Which really demonstrates their spiritual priorities.
Definitely.
The wealth of Constantinople means absolutely nothing when faced with a spiritual threat to their loved ones. They drop gold to run toward danger.
But here's the crazy part. It's a fake out.
It is.
When they get back to Syria, exhausted and terrified, they realize the scream was a lie. The Dajjal hasn't appeared yet. It was a false alarm sent by a demon, or Satan himself, to disrupt their victory.
This huge twist.
I kept rereading this part. Why would the text include a fake out right at the moment of ultimate triumph? What does that do for the narrative?
Well, it is a brilliant psychological and narrative device. Think about the tension it creates.
Right.
You think you've won. You've defeated the million-man Roman army. You've taken the capital. You have the Ark of the Covenant.
You feel invincible.
You think it's over. You think you've reached the end of history.
Right.
And the false alarm shatters that illusion.
It grounds them again.
It reminds the reader and the believers in the narrative. Yeah. No, the true test hasn't even begun. The physical wars, the sieges, the millions dead, that was just the prelude. The spiritual war is next. It keeps everyone completely off balance.
It's exhausting just reading about it. They rush back to Jerusalem and Damascus. Their nerves are fried. They find out it was a lie. But the real final act is, in fact, about to begin.
And to face this true end, they need a true leader.
Because the civil wars and the Roman invasions have left the world in ruins, and the believers are in desperate need of unification.
Right. And this is where the figure of the Mahdi emerges.
A Mahdi.
Yes, the Mahdi, which translates to the guided one. He's the central messianic figure in Islamic eschatology.
And his origin story in this text is fascinating because he really doesn't want the job.
No, he wants nothing to do with it.
Amidst all this global chaos, the text says this man, who is from the direct lineage of the Prophet Muhammad, is hiding in Mecca. He has his back pressed against the Kaaba, the black cubic structure at the center of the Grand Mosque, the holiest site in Islam. He is literally shivering, seeking refuge from the people who want to make him their leader.
He is the ultimate reluctant savior.
Hmm.
The scholars from the region track him down, and people literally have to drag him out against his will.
Wow.
They force him to accept their pledge of allegiance between the corner of the Kaaba and the Station of Abraham, which are two of the most sacred physical points within the sanctuary in Mecca.
Why is his reluctance so important to the story?
Because his profound reluctance is key to his legitimacy. It proves he isn't a power-hungry warlord like the Sufyani or the corrupt Abbasid princes. He is pure in his intentions because he has no intention of ruling at all.
That makes total sense. When he finally accepts the pledge, he only has 314 followers. That number is incredibly specific.
Yes, and it is deeply symbolic for anyone familiar with early Islamic history.
Why 314?
314 is the exact traditional number of fighters who stood with the Prophet Muhammad at the Battle of Badr.
Oh.
Badr's was the very first, most desperate battle of early Islam, where a tiny, outgunned Muslim force defeated the pagan army of Mecca.
So it's a parallel.
Exactly. By giving the Mahdi exactly 314 followers, the text is saying, history is repeating itself. The cycle has come all the way back to the beginning. The Mahdi is restarting the faith from its most vulnerable, purest point.
And he needs that purity, because word gets out that he's been proclaimed leader in Mecca. And the Sufyani, remember our pockmarked villain from the Dry Valley who survived the civil wars?
Oh, he's still around.
He is still alive, ruling from Damascus. He hears about the Mahdi, and he sends an expeditionary force, a massive army from Iraq, down into the Arabian Peninsula to kill him.
But the Mahdi doesn't even have to draw a sword to defeat this army.
No. In one of the most famous miracles of Islamic eschatology, the text describes how the Sufyani's army marches into the desert to a place called El Baida, which just means the white desert between Medina and Mecca.
Right.
And suddenly the earth simply opens up. It swallows the entire army whole. Horses, weapons, men gone.
It's an incredible image.
The text says only 1 or 2 survivors are left alive, and in a horrifying detail, their faces are turned backward on their heads. They are sent back to the Sufyani to tell him what happened.
The swallowing of the army at El Baida is the undeniable divine validation of the Mahdi. It's God saying, this is my chosen leader, and the earth itself will protect him.
That's a huge turning point.
It really is. When the news of this reaches the rest of the Islamic world, the text notes that the Abdal of Sham, which refers to a hidden hierarchy of righteous, mystical saints living in Syria, and the noble groups of Iraq travel to Mecca to pledge allegiance to him.
So his army just swells with the most pious men left on earth.
Exactly.
And now the Mahdi marches north. He leaves Mecca and heads toward Jerusalem for the final confrontation with the Sufyani.
And the politics here are so petty, even at the end of the world.
I know. When the Mahdi arrives, the Sufyani is actually terrified. He looks at the Mahdi's forces, remembers the swallowed army, and he initially surrenders.
He does.
He walks out, pledges allegiance to the Mahdi, and gives up his power.
But human pride and tribal politics intervene one last time.
Always.
The Sufyani's maternal tribe is the Kalb tribe. They are a massive, powerful Bedouin confederation, and they are absolutely furious that he surrendered.
They basically shame him. They say, God gave you the crown and you took it off and handed it to this guy.
Right.
They push him so hard that the Sufyani goes back to the Mahdi and says, actually, I want to cancel my surrender. Give me my oath back.
And the Mahdi, remarkably, honors the request. He says, fine. If you want war, we will have war. The treaty is broken.
And the resulting battle is an absolute rout. The Mahdi's forces annihilate the Kalb tribe and the Sufyani's army.
Total destruction.
The text says the loser is the one who misses out on the spoils of Kalb. And the Sufyani himself is captured. His end is brutal, but very specific.
Extremely specific.
He is taken to the gates of Jerusalem, or in some texts, the steps of the Mount of Olives, to a specific rock, and he is slaughtered there like a sheep. The human villain is finally gone.
Now, I want to pause here and note a fascinating narrative thread that occurs in the texts around this time.
Okay, what is it?
While the Mahdi is consolidating power in Jerusalem, the text suddenly shifts focus to an entire military campaign directed at India.
Right. I was reading the outline of these sources, and suddenly we are talking about an India campaign. It almost feels out of place with all the focus on Syria, Rome, and Constantinople. Why India?
Well, it highlights the global scope of the Mahdi's impending justice. You have to remember how medieval scholars viewed the map of the world.
India was like the edge of the world.
Exactly. India represented the edge of the known, civilized world to the east, just as Rome represented the edge to the west. It was the land of immense wealth, exotic goods, and powerful kings.
So what happens?
The text mentions that a king in Jerusalem will send an army to India. They will conquer it, bring its kings back in chains, who are subsequently forgiven and accept the faith, and they will bring back the immense treasures of India to physically decorate the city of Jerusalem.
So it's about drawing all the wealth and power from the absolute edges of the earth into the center.
Exactly. It's a vision of total worldwide submission to this new era of justice, gathering the wealth of the East to adorn the spiritual center of the world in Jerusalem.
So Jerusalem's decorated, the Sufyani is dead, the Mahdi is ruling, and the world is basically united.
Yes.
But remember that scream from Constantinople? The false alarm about the Dajjal?
Yes.
Well, now it's not false. The true Dajjal, the Antichrist, finally appears on Earth.
The ultimate supernatural test has arrived.
He is spreading chaos, claiming to be God. The Mahdi and the Muslim army gather in Syria to face him. The sky is dark, the stakes are ultimate, they line up for battle, and the time for the dawn prayer arrives.
And this is the crescendo of the entire epic.
Tell me?
The text describes how, as the ranks are straightening for prayer, Jesus Isa, the son of Mary, descends from the sky.
He descends right there in the camp, his hands resting on the wings of two angels.
It's an incredibly powerful moment.
And the Mahdi offers to step back and let Jesus lead the prayer, but Jesus refuses. He says, "The prayer was established for you, honoring the Mahdi's leadership and the validity of the Islamic community."
Right.
And then the battle against the Dajjal begins. But it's not much of a battle, is it?
No, it's not a military conflict in the traditional sense.
Yep.
You can't fight the Dajjal with swords.
What happens?
The text says that the Dajjal, this terrifying figure of ultimate deception who has thrown the world into chaos, simply looks at Jesus.
Okay.
And the mere sight of Jesus, the true Messiah, causes the false Messiah to physically melt.
Melt?
Yes, the text uses a very specific simile, like salt dissolving in water.
Salt and water, all that buildup, all the fear, the million-man armies, the civil wars, and the ultimate evil just dissolves at the presence of true divine light.
It's an incredible image to end the war on. Jesus shows his spear with the Dajjal's blood on it, proving he is dead and the world is finally safe.
The Melahim, the great epics, are definitively over.
The roadmap has finally reached its destination.
But as we wrap this up, there is an epilogue to these texts that I found deeply surprising.
The epilogue is fascinating.
You would think after the Antichrist melts and Jesus is on earth and the Mahdi is ruling, that's it, right? Happily ever after, eternal utopia. Roll credits on human history.
You would assume that the cycle of history stops there in a state of grace.
Yeah.
But these classical texts are remarkably, perhaps cynically, grounded in the realities of human nature.
What do you mean?
The texts state that the Mahdi rules fairly for 7 to 9 years. He fills the earth with justice and equity, just as it was once filled with tyranny and oppression. Wealth is distributed freely. No one is poor.
But then he dies. Just a normal human death.
Right.
And what happens next? Does the utopia hold? No. The text says a man from the Makhzum tribe takes over.
The Makhzum tribe was a prominent, wealthy clan of the Quraysh, the wider tribe of the Prophet Muhammad. Historically, they were known for their political ambitions and aristocratic pride.
And almost immediately upon taking power, this new leader becomes incredibly greedy.
Utopia shatters.
He cuts off everyone's stipends. People complain, so he starts executing them. He goes on a tyrannical rampage and slaughters the Quraysh tribe, the Prophet's own lineage, until none of them are left.
It is a profound desecration. Within a single generation, the world plunges right back into corruption, greed, and tribal slaughter.
It's just wild.
The infrastructure of perfect justice built by the Mahdi is dismantled by petty human ambition almost overnight.
Wait, so after all of that, the angels descending, the earth-swallowing armies, the melting Antichrist, the literal Son of Mary coming down from the clouds, they just go back to cutting welfare and killing each other for power.
They witnessed the ultimate, undeniable proof of the divine. And it still wasn't enough to permanently cure human nature.
That is just staggering, and it is the exact thought I want to leave you with today.
It's a heavy thought.
Think about what the people in this narrative survived. They saw miracles that defy comprehension, and yet it only takes one generation for humanity to revert to its baseline of greed and violence. So I ask you, are these ancient prophecies just a roadmap of a terrifying geopolitical future? Or are they actually a profound, slightly pessimistic commentary on the inevitable cyclical flaws of the human condition itself? Even if God himself intervenes to fix the world, human beings will eventually find a way to break it again.
It suggests that the true, unending trial isn't the monsters outside our walls, but the persistent flaws within ourselves.
Something to mull over as you navigate your own world today. No burning ships required.